Good morning. I am Cindy Nellis. I'm the director here at PennWest Clarion Small Business Development Center, and we welcome you to today's webinar on OSHA, first aid, PPE, and equipment safety. Today's webinar is hosted by my SBDC, PennWest Clarion, as well as the Gannon University Small Business Development Center. So we appreciate their co-host. And we have some great speakers for you. So I'd like to get started just giving you a little bit of a introduction to the Small Business Development Center. The Small Business Development Center is an organization with the mission to help businesses start, grow, and succeed. We provide consulting services, primarily providing one-on-one business consulting services. And those services are provided at no cost and confidential. We are here to provide assistance to any for-profit business or an individual looking to start a for-profit business. To us, a small business is any business, generally speaking, with less than 500 employees. So about 99% of all of our businesses out there we can work with. Also, a part of our program is our training. So today is an example of the training that we do. And we're always looking for topics that you're looking for training on. So as you provide feedback on today's webinar, we're looking for topics that you're looking for training on, and we're happy to do that moving forward. And finally, we also provide access to tools and resources. So through our one-on-one business consulting services, there may be a lot of different types of tools and resources that we have available, some of which would be databases that we use to do market and industry research, financial analysis, as well as marketing strategy implementation. And then some of our resources have to do with our templates, our forms that we have available, guides that we have available specific to certain topics like HR, for example, business planning, marketing plans, and as well as expertise on website development and SEO optimization, search engine optimization, and e-commerce. So we've got a lot of different resources, whether it's at our specific center or our network. And speaking of our network, in Pennsylvania, the Small Business Development Center network is made up of 15 centers, all located at institutions of higher education. So we are hosted by the named universities. We're also funded through state and federal tax dollars. And so that's how we are able to provide our services at no cost. The other thing that we wanted to mention is that we here at PennWest, we are a WEDNet partner, and WEDNet stands for Workforce and Economic Development Network. And we are a program that provides funding for training. So if you are a business that is always looking to make sure that you are skilling up your employees for competitive reasons, to make sure that they have all the skills that they need to help provide your products and services in the best possible way, then WEDNet may be a program for you. Primarily what we want to say is WEDNet, there are some program guidelines, and so we'd be happy to talk with you, but your company needs to qualify through the program, your employee needs to qualify, as well as the training. And so we're here to talk to you about it. WEDNetPA.com is the website that will give you all the information about the program and provide you with an opportunity to submit an inquiry for us to review your needs. And this is my contact information, as well as the contact information for the Gannon SBDC. So after today, you will get these slides, a copy of these slides, as well as a copy of this recording. So you'll have our contact information. We encourage you to connect with the SBDC, especially if you are not a client yet, but you're looking for help. Definitely connect with us by completing a request for counseling form at any one of our websites. And I'll be sending you that link as well. So I am going to stop there And that's the introduction about the SBDC. I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. Mark Harmon will begin today, and he is the Compliance Assistant Specialist with the U.S. Department of Labor within OSHA. And then we also have David, yes, I cannot never remember how to say your name.
Yanoschick.
Thank you. Thank you. And he is with the Pennsylvania OSHA Consulting Program, hosted at IUP, and he is a SHARP Outreach Coordinator. And I'm sure we'll find out what that stands for a little bit later. So with that, Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you and move on to your presentation. Oh, and I wanted to say for all of you, your cameras are off, your microphones are off. If you have a question for me, your host, use the chat feature. If you have a question for our speakers, I'd ask that you use the Q&A. And we will try to make sure all of your questions are answered throughout today's webinar. And if not, we can certainly get your questions answered later. And the other thing is, if we end up having a lot of questions for you, we may ask that we may turn your microphones on so that you can talk with our speakers in person. So we'll see how that goes along. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And today's topic is the first aid, personal protective equipment, and equipment safety. Again, these topics are important to us. We get these suggestions from the audience. So by doing so, we hope that this is important information, and we're always happy to pass this along. So jumping into the slides, I believe Cindy had indicated we will give you copies of this. So can we go to the next one? This is just the disclaimer. I'm responsible to put that on all outreach material, but jump to the next one. Today, with the agenda, we will cover 1910, which is the general industry OSHA regulations, subpart K, which will include medical service and first aid under 151. We will talk about paragraph B. We'll talk about the quick drenching eye wash station, which is also in 151 under paragraph C. The large portion of my presentation today will be under subpart I, which is going to be information about personal protective equipment. And again, I did include a short video. I don't know if we're going to get it to work today, but there is a link within that slide. So if after today you are able to view that on your own, it's a very good video, and I encourage you to do so. Let's go to the next slide. All right, today, first aid and medical services under 1910. Most people, when they say, what am I responsible for when it comes to first aid? And I say, well, that depends. Let's see what the OSHA regulation says. And if you read paragraph B in 151, it says, and I just cut and pasted it, it says, in the absence of an infirmary, clinic, or hospital in near proximity to the workplace, which is used for treatment of injured employees, persons shall be adequately trained to render first aid, and supplies shall be readily available. So right there it says there needs to be at least available someone who can either render first aid on site if someone gets hurt at your company, or you have to be in that, as it says, near proximity to either a clinic or hospital or somewhere where they can get treatment. So what this typically comes down to, or I explained, is most people will answer, well, we will just call 911. And I say, well, yeah, I'm sure that would be the easiest answer. But if you can understand, not everyone has access to 911 in what would be considered near proximity. So there is an OSHA number that we look at, and it breaks into two categories. So whenever you're talking about someone injured at work and do I need to provide first aid, I say there's two versions, depending upon first, what can be expected in the type of injury sustained. And I'll give you two examples. So in the first example, I'll say if it's an office type work environment where we don't anticipate life-threatening injuries. I would say that would be the occasion where if you are relying upon 911, the time frame for that response can be up to 15 minutes. Now, jump into the other category. The other category would be if you are in a work environment where there is the possibility of serious injury and or death. So think of something more of like a manufacturing, factory, construction. The time frame of the responding 911 ambulance, EMT, whoever's coming to provide first aid has to be within 3 to 4 minutes. So again, that comes back to, depending upon where your business is, if you're saying, well, I will just call 911 if someone is hurt, I would say, okay, well, what type of injury would you expect, could be expected, and also what would be the response time? So that's why I say, if you can't meet that response time of 3 to 4 minutes in a factory, then that's where 151B says that you must have someone trained to render first aid and first aid supplies readily available. Let's go to the next slide. Again, the 911 service versus first aid responders. I can't say with certainty that everyone has to have a first aid responder on site, but again, you have to be able to describe and define that example that I gave you about, well, it depends upon what type of accident may occur, what type of injuries may be sustained, what is the response time to, are you calling 911 or are you calling the fire department? Like if you live in a rural area, right, the fire department may be a volunteer fire department. So that may be something that you also need to consider. It will take them longer to arrive at your work site. I did include on the second bullet point, there are a few OSHA standards that specifically call for someone trained in first aid. And I included those, permit required confined space work, logging, and under electrical power generation. So if you fall into any of those standards, there is a particular specific requirement that you do have to have first aid responders on site. There is an interpretation letter that explains all this, and the date on that is February 9, 1994. Again, if you got questions on something like that, add that in the chat or shoot me an email after we're done today. Let's go to the next slide. People ask the question about first aid. Do I also need to know CPR? And to me, the answer to that is, I would say if you are taking a first aid class, my understanding, the last couple that I took, CPR is part of that. So you will receive a certification that says you are trained in CPR as well. What about AEDs? Are AEDs required? At this time, there is no OSHA requirement to provide an AED. We see them in the work environment. We like that. That's an improved piece of equipment that is now available. The price came down on those a lot, which again makes that something more viable to a company. The third bullet point, talking about bloodborne pathogen. I would speak to that because if, again, you have an expectation that if someone is injured where you work, that they have prompt medical attention. So if the company has first aid responders, right? Someone who works at the company has been trained in first aid, CPR, and is rushing to help someone. There may also be other OSHA standards you should be aware of, bloodborne pathogen being one of them, right? Bloodborne pathogen is the infectious material, could be, blood, saliva, all the things that can infect you. And if the company you work for is now asking you to save someone's life who may be injured at work, then yeah, you want to make sure that you're not exposing this first aid responder. So as to protect them, you would need to also comply with 1910.1030, 1030, bloodborne pathogen. So there's some requirements in there you should become familiar with as well. Thinking about emergencies, what do we think of when we're at work? Carbon monoxide, chest pains. If somebody's at work and they say, hey, I think I'm having a medical issue. I have pain in my chest, seizures, falls, burns. Again, all of this falls into, if this happens at work, we need to make sure that first aid medical service is provided. And that should be something all companies should be aware of, making sure that they have the response time adequate to where they're located, to who is either coming to the site to help. Think of, again, what we had mentioned about the extent of injuries. So if you're working in that computer office type setting, I'm guessing that you're probably not going to have more of what we would think of life-threatening injuries, which you could maybe see like on a manufacturing factory floor. However, medical attention still needs to be provided when needed to anyone who is injured at work. Let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about at what point do we need to have eye wash stations and showers. If you look in the OSHA standard 1910 151 paragraph C, it says where the eyes and or body of any person may be exposed to injurious corrosive materials, suitable facilities for drenching, flushing of the eyes and body shall be provided within the work area for immediate emergency use. All right, so let's look at this. I'll start with the eye wash. 151 says there must be suitable facilities for quick drenching and flushing. What we typically run into is, number one, for this requirement to be applicable, I have to simply establish that we have a corrosive material. It's very important that we understand the word corrosive. Corrosive means that it's going to cause immediate and in most cases permanent damage. So we need to, as much as possible, be able to remove that. Once we've established that there is a corrosive material in the workplace and that the employees have exposure to it, then that's when this particular standard would apply. What we also run into is, as you can see from the picture, these are permanent or plumbed eye wash and shower stations. These are great because they provide what would be an endless supply of water to flush the corrosive chemicals. What we generally, or what we run into on occasion though, is companies will have a water bottle, right, to flush their eye with. I would say there's nothing wrong with having an eye wash bottle, but I hope that's not the only source of drenching, flushing material that you have. Let's go to the next slide. As I said, once you have a corrosive material in the workplace and employees have any type of exposure to that, that's when the eye wash needs to be established and made available. I wrote the question that says, can I use a portable eye wash bottle? Well, I would point to, if you've read anything about washing corrosive material from your eye or trying to get it off your skin, in most cases, it will always say to deliver at a minimum 15 minutes of flushing in order to wash away that corrosive material. I always point to, again, go back to, you should always read your safety data sheet. Your safety data sheet will give you that information that will so say to you what would be the practical type of response if you had this material to get in your eyes. 15 minutes, if you've got a bottle that only is, 1-2 liter bottle, that's not going to last 15 minutes. Because again, even as you are flushing your eye, there are certain expectation as to the amount of flushing that you're doing. right? You shouldn't just be dripping it in there, with an eyedropper. I mean, you want to get that out of your eye and you want to be squirting it. If I've had this question here as well. Is the employee still required to use the personal protective equipment, even though we have an eye wash? Yeah, the requirement to have personal protective equipment is in place, and it must be used, considered, because again, the idea is you're trying to prevent the employee from getting the corrosive material in their eye. So just because you have one doesn't mean you don't have to have the other. Does that make sense? Right? You got to have safety glasses, in some cases goggles, but also you have to have the eye wash, right? So one would be the backup of the other, because again, the idea here is you're hoping to save the person from permanent damage, whether it's their vision or, if it's on their skin. Corrosive materials are just as they're described, they're corrosive, right? They eat through flesh. Tissue is, damaged, so you want to get that off as quickly as possible. Question comes up sometimes about travel distance. I usually try not to give us a number on that, but I would say it needs to be readily and immediately available, because if you can imagine, even with a corrosive, some corrosives are worse than others. Is that right? So depending upon how corrosive the material is, you would want that means in which to flush or to remove to be that much more available, right? So you don't want to have to walk all the way across the shop floor to get to this. You want it to be available, and you want it to be immediately available. Obviously, you want you to inspect and flush out if it's a plumb system on a regular basis. If you've ever done that, opened up the valve on an eye wash, the first thing that comes out of it, if it's been sitting there for a while, it may be dirty, and that's not what you want to put into your eyes. So again, there is a requirement about inspecting it and flushing it out. So what you would do is just simply turn it on, let the water run for a little bit. I also point to at the bottom, if this is something that is outside or is subject to freezing, think about that from a weather standpoint. You don't want cold temperatures to freeze your water supply to your eye wash or your shower. So again, think of what time of the year it is. If it's an outside unit, you should be taking some precaution in order to make sure that that is available and in a serviceable condition. Let's go to the next one. I know that was very quick about first aid and emergency eye wash, but again, if you got questions, put something up in the chat and we'll try to answer them as we go. This is the one, and we tried it earlier, and I don't think it's going to work, but if you're not familiar with these videos, these are videos from the OSHA Consultation Service, which Dave will talk about near the end of today's presentation. They have a very good selection of videos available. This particular one on personal protective equipment is, just over 7 minutes. It's a great video because again, it'll highlight or give you an overview of what the OSHA regulation is on personal protective equipment. The link there at the very bottom should take you to that. And there's a whole series of these videos on different topics. Let's go to the next slide. Talking about personal protective equipment. The employer must protect employees from workplace hazards. So when we say that, what does that mean? Well, obviously, anything within the work environment that could be determined a hazard, that is what you are wanting to safeguard the worker from. So when we say protect the worker, There's ways in which you can go about doing that. What I always tell people is the employer must, if possible, use any engineering or workplace control to eliminate the hazard before you even start that type of operation. So, and we'll go through some of the examples of what that may be. But at the very end, if you still find out that you can't substitute something, whether it be a product or a piece of equipment, or if you cannot engineer out the problem, change the way it is used, administrative controls. Administrative controls may be, instead of making an employee work 8 hours in a noisy environment, you now have one employee work 4 and another second employee come in and work the second half of the shift. So there's different ways to control hazards. What we want you to understand and take away from personal protective equipment is that that is the last or the least effective type of protection. I mean, if you're putting somebody in hearing protection, putting safety glasses on their face to protect their eyes, that is, again, it's a level of protection, but it's the one that's least effective because it can be either misused or not work as it needs because the person is not wearing it properly. So as much as we like personal protective equipment, that should never be your first choice. Let's go to the next slide. Other way. Yep, there it is. This is a picture of what is described as the hierarchy of controls. You learn this in safety school. I remember in college. This is how you would break down or understand what is at the top here. You can see where on the left it says most effective, all the way to the bottom where it says least effective. So again, when we're talking about control, we're talking about hazards, we're talking about safeguarding workers. At the very top, as it says under elimination, this means you physically remove the hazard, right? You eliminate it, so it's no longer a problem. Coming down, if you can substitute or replace the hazard, this may be something, again, think of like using a chemical. One chemical is very corrosive, or a second chemical, chemical B, may do the same type of work, but it may not be as corrosive. So that would be a type of substitution, right? Again, the big picture here is you're trying to safeguard the worker. The engineering controls, when we see engineering controls in place, think of like guarding. Think about push buttons, whether you got a one-handed button or you got a two-handed button. And again, from a safety professional standpoint, having someone use two hands to maybe cycle the machine, that means that if it takes two hands, they can't put their hand in the machine while it's cycling, right? So there's engineering controls that you can utilize that would, again, safeguard the worker. Administrative controls, again, this is the way in which you can change the process. The example I gave about hearing, again, the way we measure noise exposure with respect to a work environment, it's measured over an 8-hour period. The example of an administrative control in a noisy environment could be, instead of having one employee exposed all day, as I said, you could break it up into where you have one employee work in the morning and another employee working in the afternoon, so that the one person is not exposed for the 8 hours of noise. You're breaking it down into smaller portions, smaller doses of what would be the noise exposure. That would be a type of administrative control. The last, again, as you can see here, is personal protective equipment. And again, it's not that it can't be used, but it's that should not be your first choice when trying to control hazards in the workplace. Let's go to the next slide. Engineering controls. Again, these are ones that if the machine or the work environment can be physically changed to prevent the employee's exposure, then the hazard can be eliminated with an engineering control, right? So engineering controls might be the way in which the production line is set up to where if you have something to where the employee can be moved or positioned differently, that may be a type of engineering control, right? So a lot of these are things that you want to do on maybe like the front end when you're setting up something, when you're going to start making, say, the product is a widget. Okay, well, we have the guy over here with a nail gun. We don't want the guy with a nail gun shooting it when we have someone standing right beside of him who is putting on, the labels for the packaging. Okay, because the nail gun would be a hazard to the person who would be in the vicinity, right? So again, engineering controls, you're trying to engineer out the problem so as to safeguard the worker. Let's go to the next one. Examples, again, could be initial designs, right? I said engineering controls are good on the front end. Ventilation is an example. Substitution of that harmful material, right? And again, when I say harmful material, think of all the improvements over time with product development, right? Think of, years ago, you used to only have maybe one choice. Now, in most cases, right, there's the green products, whether they're more eco-friendly. Again, they may be less hazardous. So again, this is a way of engineering out a problem. Enclosures, isolations, or changing the process, right? Just because you've always made your product, we start at table A, we go to table B, okay, well, look at it from a bigger picture. If you're having people that are injured, okay, well, try to drill down and find out, okay, well, what was the root cause? What was the reason this person was injured? Was it maybe, as I said, the example of the guy with a nail gun, he's back there shooting nails, making a package for the product, and the person putting the labels on are they're standing right beside of them. And okay, that would be a hazard that I don't think those two need to be as close together. There should be some separation between them. So again, engineering controls work very well. Let's go to the next one. Let's talk about administrative. Administrative controls, again, are very useful if they're applicable, if you can use them. If an employee can be removed from exposure by changing the way they do their job, and then the hazard is eliminated with administrative controls. The best example I can think of, like I said, is the noise exposure. But think of something maybe ergonomic. If you got someone who's doing a repetitive task all day, they're taking off a cap and they're putting on a cap, and they're doing this, hundreds of times an hour. Okay, well, the hazard would be the repetitive motion. Is there any way we can maybe have employee A work that for an hour and then move them to another workstation to have them do something that is not that same movement, right? So we're moving or rotating the workers in what would be like a job rotation. That would be an administrative control, right? So that you're not causing injury to the employee who's doing something over a long period of time, right? You're trying to mix up their work a little bit as to prevent the injuries that may be caused from that type of hazard. Let's go to the next one. Again, examples, job rotation, wet methods, say, think if you're cutting something, or if there's a wet method that could keep down the exposure. Housekeeping and maintenance, again, yeah, if you're cleaning as you go type work environment. If something is very dirty, or something that is causing the employees to be exposed unnecessarily to like a nuisance dust. Let's go to the next one. Examples of PPE. And I know some of these may be just a review, but again, I guess I still find myself, when I talk to people about personal protective equipment, they don't always, I guess, see things that are not in their work environment, right? They say, well, we only wear safety glasses. And I go, okay, but have you ever considered or thought of other types of PPE that may be needed? And they, they sometimes say, well, we don't need it. And I'm going, all right, well, one of the requirements for the OSHA personal protective equipment is that the company conduct a hazard assessment. And that would determine if personal protective equipment is needed. There's some examples of that, and I'll show you in future slides. But so when we're talking about eye protection, we're talking about either safety glasses or goggles, which would be tight fitting. If it's face protection, that would be a face shield, right? Think of something that would come over your face that would cover below your chin. Hard hats. There are different types of hard hats. There's what would be considered a hard hat that's used, say, like on a construction site, you would normally be familiar with, but there's also head protection, such as a bump cap. A bump cap is just a hat that is worn for the purpose of protecting someone when they would bump their head. So instead of something falling and striking them, it would be for the purpose of them bumping their head on something that would maybe, low head clearance. Protecting someone's feet, obviously safety-toed footwear, steel-toed boots, composite toe. There's all types of brands, different models, versions, sizes, and shapes. Hand protection. Think of gloves. There's an endless number of gloves that are out there. Again, glove selection should be based upon what you are being exposed to, because not all gloves provide the same protection. When I say arms, think of like sleeves. One of the examples I can tell you with sleeves, think of heat exposure. I know one time I was dropping my dry cleaning off. I'll use this example. And it was at a dry cleaner. And I noticed the girl who was checking me out, taking my money, giving me my shirts back. I looked on her arm, and her arm was just, I'll say, covered with burns, what looked to be, second-degree scarring from burns that she had received. And the next time I dropped my dry cleaning off, I may have had with me an example. And again, if you've ever seen the little sleeves that go on, it's just a type of cloth. And again, what is it protecting you from? What would be a hot surface? So to me, someone who works in that environment, that would be a very useful piece of personal protective equipment because of the hot irons and the equipment used in dry cleaning. Protecting your body, think of high vis, the vest, anytime you're around vehicular traffic. Other types of body protection, think about flame resistant clothing, coveralls. If you're around any type of operation where there's a potential for a flash fire, think of FR clothing. Hearing protection, earmuffs, earplugs. I think these are becoming obviously more usable. I know if I'm at home cutting my grass, weed eating, I wear my hearing protection. Try to set a good example. Let's go to the next slide. A lot of these are, again, we want you to have the understanding for personal protective equipment. You should be doing, again, as the slide indicates, for selecting, providing, and using personal protective equipment, the company should assess the workplace to determine what hazards are present. This is, or likely to be present, which would necessitate the use of personal protective equipment. Again, what is called a hazard assessment is a document. It is needed to be in writing, needs to be certified from the company as to what hazards are in the workplace, what personal protective equipment is needed. Once the PPE has been selected, like eyeglasses, then the employer must provide training. any type of personal protective equipment you would use at the workplace, the company must provide training. Let's go to the next slide. I think at one point we get into some pictures. Again, training being very important. That must be something that is documented. Again, as with all OSHA training, if you're not documenting the training, what it was, when did it happen, who was trained. Doesn't necessarily have to be a signature. I guess if you want to get someone to sign it that says, you know, I, employee, received training, as long as their name is on it and there's a date, to me, that's enough for a training document. Because I guess that leads to the question. Sometimes I've had people say, well, the employee refused to sign it. Okay, well, put their name down and you can make a note that says employee refused to sign it. If you put their name down, I'll know it's them, because I don't have any OSHA requirements that says they have to sign it, if that makes sense. I can point to the company. I can say to you, you're required to train the worker and please document that. But you know, the signatures, I'm not worried about an employee's signature. I want to make sure that the company is conducting a PPE hazard assessment. I want that to be in writing, and I want the company to certify that it was done. Let's talk about training. The employees required to use the PPE must be trained. And again, if you read into the OSHA standard under personal protective equipment, it'll give you these specific bullet points. When is the PPE necessary? What type of PPE is necessary? How to properly put it on, take it off, how to adjust it, how to wear it. Also, limitations. What limitations does the personal protective equipment have? Employees need to understand and know what that means. Proper care, maintenance, what is the useful life and disposal? So again, if you're issuing personal protective equipment to an employee, you know, pick one, safety glasses. All right, they need to understand that safety glasses are there to protect you from impact, you know, getting hit with something. Regular safety glasses, though, would not protect you from, you know, think of something like welding or laser usage, right? Something that would be beyond the capability of regular safety glasses. So, how do we take care of, or how do we maintain our personal protective equipment? Yeah, some personal protective equipment does need to be cleaned. I'll say as one example, think about storage. Sometimes I see personal protective equipment just sort of thrown on the workbench, right? It's not, it may not be in a serviceable condition if you just sort of lay it down, and then, you know, a week later when you need your face shield, you go back to pick it up and it's, you know, it's filthy. You know, okay, so cleaning, but also storage should be something you would consider or think of. Useful life. An example of what I would say with useful life would be, think of like disposable earplugs. Those are by definition disposable. So you don't really think that those would last forever. But what I usually run into with earplugs, think of the way in which you have to insert them, right? It says that you roll them. You roll them with your fingers, open your ear canal, put the earplug in. What we run into with disposable earplugs sometimes is when they get dirty, right? Think of like if you got grease on your hands, if that earplug is dirty, you don't want to put that in your ear. So I guess that's why I always say disposable earplugs are just that. They're disposable. You should think of what would be maybe a better selection of hearing protection if, as the company has to purchase the PPE, if they say, well, they're using too much of it. That's a question we get sometimes. They'll say, well, they're just wasting it. Going, well, sometimes a PPE are disposable and you don't really want to reuse it. If you think you're spending too much money on disposable earplugs, then think of maybe a different type of hearing protection, or even better yet, maybe go back and try to engineer out the problem of noise, right? Remember we talked about the hierarchy. Think about how do we limit the amount of noise the employee is exposed to. But personal protective equipment does in most cases have a serviceable life, and you should be aware of what that is. Even if it's a pair of gloves, if an employee has a pair of gloves and I don't know, the fingers are worn out of it. Okay, well, I'm going to say that pair of gloves really probably isn't in a serviceable condition if the fingertips are worn out, right? And you have exposed skin. So let's go to the next one. Eye protection, again, different types, depending upon what type of activity in the picture, right? I can see from that's something that involves heat, right? It's going to be very hot. Let's go to the next one. So what are some of the causes of eye injury? Again, think of flying particles. Things could be, metal, wood dust. Think of things that could be coming at you because of the work environment. Could be something caustic, whether it be chemicals. Again, anytime I hear the word caustic or corrosive, I'm thinking that's the opportunity for goggles and probably a face shield. Think of blood or potentially infectious fluids. Again, if you're working, in a hospital or somewhere, yeah, you don't want something to hit you in the face, and next thing you know, it hits your eye. Intense light, such as welding or lasers. Again, there's certain characteristics that eye protection should have if that's what it is intended for. Let's go to the next one. Again, basic safety glasses. Again, they make so many different types now. Used to be sort of the one size fits all. That's not the case at all now, right? Companies make these things from, top of the line, something that's crazy expensive to something that's more affordable, something that is user friendly. They do have side shields, right? So as to protect something from coming from the side. They would have the expectation to protect you from moderate impact, right? So think of woodworking, grinding type operations. Safety glasses are probably one of the most basic types of personal protective equipment. Let's go to the next one. Safety goggles. Again, if you're not familiar, goggles are something that protect the eye and the facial area immediately surrounding from impact, dust, and splashes. Some cases, people wear goggles over regular glasses, corrective lenses. So I myself, I have, I wear prescription glasses. If I did not have prescription safety glasses that I could use at work, I would use a pair of goggles to go over them. Does that make sense? So you can use goggles over prescription glasses. And again, it would provide you a level of protection for your eyes by doing that. Let's go to the next slide. Again, welding, when you get into that, you get into different types of intensity of radiant light. Protects your face and your eyes from sparks and splatter and slag. So that's why, again, a welder's helmet covers exposed skin. Again, the shading on the lens is for a particular purpose to protect your eyes from the ultraviolet. Let's go to the next one. Lasers, again, in the work environment. And again, I don't know if you have this at your workplace, but if you do, if you read the particulars on that type of product, a laser, it will say eye protection, consider eye protection. Again, depending upon the intensity of the laser, what are you using it for? Are you just, using it like as a carpenter would, to level something, or in a factory where you're cutting steel with it, right? So again, anytime you're using a laser, there should be a sign up, tells you what type of eye protection you need. Again, this should all be determined with your hazard assessment in writing, certified, so as that you know about these hazards and that you take steps to protect the workers. Let's go to the next one. Face shields, again, face shields are very specific. They protect the face from splashes, sprays. They do not provide protection from impact, meaning that, getting hit with something. So I guess sometimes when I've seen people use face shields, I've seen them not used properly. Think of like a grinder. If you have a grinder and you're using it and there's sparks flying everywhere, a face shield should be used. But even the type of face shield that you select, make sure that it says this is protection from. Is it protecting you from splashing, liquids, or is it protecting you from flying, metal debris? So again, think of that impact hazard, because if it's not going to provide you protection, then it's not really doing what you need it to do. So let's go to the next one. Hard hats, head protection. Again, very common. You see this in a lot of work environments. And again, let's go to the next slide. Head protection falls into a couple of different categories. Again, typically people think of falling objects, right? Something's going to fall and hit you in the head. Okay, that would be, I think, the opportunity for a hard hat, right? Because if you look inside the hard hat, it has a suspension, and there's a space in there, enough to give you some shock of energy absorbing space. So if something hits you, it's not going to, damage your head. Whereas if it's a bump cap, right, bumping your head against something that is a fixed beam, a pipe, that could be the application for a bump cap. If you've ever seen a bump cap, usually it sits a little closer to your head. It's not as sturdy. I've seen people wearing bump caps now, and it's instead of a plastic shell, it's literally a plastic shell inside of a baseball cap. And again, somebody developed this as a bump cap. So electrical conductors, if you're exposed to electrical energy, you see these guys. There is a hard hat that has a rating for electrical applications. So think of people who work like, in the power company, things like that. So next one. They have classes. Yes, there's class G, class E, class C. And again, look at the way in which you're using the particular hard hat. Is it going to do what I need it to do for the type of work I have? So again, just like any other machine or equipment, there's different types. So same goes with hard hats, different classes. Let's go to the next one. Hearing protection, again, hearing protection. We've seen a lot of improvements over the years. Let's go to the next one. Hearing protection can come in many forms. I hope you understand hearing protection is not just one size fits all. What OSHA looks at, again, you should establish what type of noise levels you have in your facility. You would do that through sampling, through taking readings. There is an exposure limit for noise that OSHA has, and depending upon the level of noise and the duration of exposure is how that would be calculated. But if you determine that you do need hearing protection, right, you've already exhausted those engineering controls, exhausted right, you've tried to get rid of your noise problem. If you still in the end have to wear personal protective equipment, you shouldn't have just one type available. We say at a minimum there should be at least two. because again, not everyone has the same shape of ear and canal and sensitivity. Some people have, some people don't like putting stuff in their ear. Okay, then I would think they would probably need a muff like what I'm wearing here over the ear. Some people, have some brands that are soft, some brands that are hard, right? There's a large variety of hearing protection that's out there. And again, if you can eliminate the noise, then you don't have to use the PPE to begin with. So I guess that's what I tell people. If I see them wearing, earplugs, I usually say, well, have you even tried to reduce the amount of noise at your workplace? And I think I've always been surprised how many people say, well, no, that's the noise that's out there and we just work with it. And I'm going, oh, there's so many things you can do with noise. And again, a quick example, if you have an air compressor, I used to be a mechanic years ago. So, right, I used to work with tools. The air compressor, it's running all the time and compressing the air to use with the tools. But if the air compressor is setting right at the workstation, okay, that's the worst place it can be, because it makes a lot of unnecessary noise that it's very easy to move that air compressor away and then have the compressed air piped and brought into the workplace so that you're hooking into it, but you don't have, the noise of the compressor right there at the workstation. And something as simple as that, again, you're engineering the problem, you're moving the compressor out away from where the employee is working. So there's a lot of ways to, fix something that could be considered a hazard. Let's go to the next slide. This gentleman here with some foot protection, again, protecting your feet. Keep going to the next one. Again, can be, you're protecting yourself from something that can fall on your foot. Think of heavy object, tools, parts, pieces, something that could be sharp, something that could penetrate your shoe. Could be hot material, molten metals splashing onto your feet, wet, hot or wet surfaces, something that's slippery, could cause foot injuries. Let's go to the next slide. So safety-toed footwear can reduce the likelihood of injuries. Think of people that work in operations where they are exposed to materials that could fall on their feet, maybe designed to electrically conductive for use in an explosive atmosphere. So think of something that does not generate static. So safety-toed footwear is very common in the workplace, but there's a lot of different varieties out there, depending upon what type of operation you have. Let's go to the next one. Some people have the need for metatarsal guards on their safety footwear. Then the picture shows an example. Metatarsal guards are protecting not just your toes, right at the front of your foot, but it is protecting on up the foot from impact and compression. So again, typically we have people that use metatarsals, like think of the steel industry, people that are pouring large castings, something where there is something that is very heavy that has the ability to either fall onto your foot or roll onto your foot. So again, metatarsal boots would be needed in that type of operation. Let's go to the next one. Hand protection. And again, I'm trying to get through some of these. Hand protection to me is a very common exposure. And again, because there's such wide variety. And again, the idea is you're protecting someone's hands, and it could be, let's go to the next. It could be from burns, bruises, abrasions, cuts, punctures, fractures, right? So there's all kinds of things that people are exposed to with respect to, the chance to injure their hands. Not one glove will will protect you from all of those. So again, that's again back to what we had started earlier with the hazard assessment. You should go through the operation you have at your company, determine, do we have anything where we have risk or exposure to the hands? And if so, would hand protection be necessary? So let's go to the next one. Gloves. There's several different types of gloves that are available, and they each have very specific qualities or character, what they're capable of. So this one here is an example of, right, butyl has the highest permutation resistance to gas and water vapors. So think of like acetones, MEKP. I know I used to use that when I worked in aviation. If you try to just use a regular latex glove with something that is very corrosive, it's just going to eat through the glove, right? So again, you got to think of something maybe that's a chemical resistant glove. Same thing. Let's go to the next slide. If you're using something such as chlorines or aromatic solvents, right? They have different characteristics. I always start with, if it's a type of chemical, always start with the safety data sheet, and it'll tell you on there what type of hand protection, what type of other protection you may need, but it will specifically, in most cases, give you the type of glove. There are resources out there, and on one of the future slides here, I think I'm going to show it to you. There is a chart that does show different types of gloves and what those gloves are good for. Whether do they have thermal protection? Do they have, corrosive protection? Do they have, and again, gloves, sometimes there's maybe more than one choice, but one may work better and one may not work as long, if that makes sense. So again, protection, wide variety of chemicals. Some are resistant to cuts, snags, punctures. I guess the ones that I like, or what I use, and I'll give the example, when I'm cutting grass or weed eating, I got a pair of those ones they got a little Kevlar in them, right? So they're good, keeping your hands from getting cuts, and they're real thin. I mean, I'm surprised the glove manufacturers and vendors have come a long way with making their products readily available and user-friendly now. Let's go to the next one. Again, as I said, Kevlar, stainless. Oh, yeah, people using a knife or something they're cutting with, they actually make a stainless steel mesh. I see these like in the meat packing operations. Somebody standing there with a knife in their hand because they're cutting meat. Yeah, the other hand, yeah, it's got a stainless steel mesh glove on it, right? So you're not cutting yourself, or maybe someone who's working beside you, right? They would have on some type of PPE. Let's go to the next one. Body protection, again, we'll keep working our way. Next one. Depending upon what type of exposure you have to the body, whether it's intense heat, splashes of metal, hazardous chemicals, infectious materials, blood, radioactive, or radiation. Let's keep going. So there's, think of your Tyvek suit, your coveralls, something that could be a full body suit, like a level A, sleeves, aprons. Again, if you're using something that has that ability to splash, or something that could get on your skin, right? You want to cover that body part with something that will protect that worker. So again, a lot of variety. Things have improved in the 25 years I've been doing OSHA work. So again, look at what type of operation you have, look at what type of hazards you have, and go through your hazard assessment and make that selection. Let's go to the next one. Harnesses, lanyards, right? Fall protection is huge. And again, if you're working at height where you have that exposure, trying to prevent someone from falling, personal protective equipment, many types of fall protection are available. It's not just the harness and the 6-foot lanyard anymore. They make retractables, and if you don't know what a retractable is, that's the picture on the right. The gentleman actually has 2 of them on. Think of it like the seat belt in your car. It'll pull out slack unless it stops quickly, right? So it has a clutch or a brake mechanism. So yeah, there's a lot of varieties with personal protective equipment. Fall protection probably being one of the most opportunity, again, depending upon what type of application you have. Look into that as well. We're getting near the end. Let's see, next one. Again, just to summarize, and I know that was quick. Again, these are always good topics, and I wish I had 8 hours to sit and talk to you, or actually, demonstrate some PPE. But what we talked about today, right, was how the employer must implement a personal protective equipment program. They must assess their workplace for these hazards. It must be in writing. It must be certified. That certification means that the person who did the hazard assessment must put their name on it, date it, right, and tell me that it was done. The idea is to use engineering and workplace controls to eliminate these hazards before the use of PPE. Select the appropriate PPE to protect the workers from the hazards that cannot be eliminated. Inform workers why PPE is necessary and when it must be worn, right? What's the company policy? Put those signs up that say, eye protection required in this area, right? So again, you're giving them instructions, you're telling them so that they get into that routine, right? They know, all right, when I'm on the production line, I got to have my gloves, I got to have my hearing protection, I got to have my eye protection, right? So that you can then enforce that work rule and that be consistent in how it's applied. Train the workers on the care, the use of their PPE, and how to recognize if it does deteriorate or if it has failed, right? Again, we're not saying that PPE lasts forever. Remember the example I gave about the gloves? Yeah, if you issue a pair of gloves to somebody and they come back and they say, hey, my gloves are no good. Yeah, the company would need to then replace that piece of personal protective equipment. Require the workers to wear the PPE in the workplace. So again, I guess the point to that I would make is you don't give the employee a choice. And I'll use my example. Years ago, I'm in a company and I see, we'll use the foot example. I'm walking around with steel-toed boots and this guy has a pair of open-toed sandals. And I went, excuse me, where are your safety-toed footwear? And he looks at me and says, I choose not to wear it because it's uncomfortable. And I like my sandals. And I said, okay, well, you can't wear those in here. But to my surprise, the company, the safety person, said, well, he told us he didn't want to wear it. And we said that'd be okay. Okay, that's wrong. It's the company. The company has to set the policies. This is what we do here at, our company. You don't allow the worker to say, well, I don't want to do it, or I choose not to do it. Because now they're at risk of injury, right? Or exposed to a hazard. What the company should do is say, well, as a condition of your employment, you must follow our company policies, rules, procedures. And that includes, in this case, you have to wear safety-toed footwear. And if you can't, or if you won't, then you got to work somewhere else, right? So again, I guess I understand, or I see the point that somebody will say, well, they don't like wearing the hard hat because it hurts their head. Okay, well, you can't let people pick and choose what they want to follow. The OSHA regulations
ensure that workers are protected by enforcing the OSHA standards that the company must follow. So it's the company, the employer, that has to set that policy and enforce that on the worker. And don't let the employee say they don't want to wear it, because again, you have to be consistent to ensure their safety. Let's go to the next one. OSHA webpage, the resources we always have, so many. And again, if I had, 8 hours of your day, but we don't. If you're not familiar, go to the OSHA website. Almost any information you're looking for with OSHA can be found here. If you can't find it, call me, shoot me an email. I'd be happy to find it and send it to you. They're always updating this. So again, if you're not familiar, go to the webpage and look for stuff on it. It's easy to find things if you use the search bar there at the top. Let's come down, another one. Today's topic, the first aid kit. Again, there is a web page on the OSHA website. This is where it's at. It's going to go through some of that stuff we talked about. Do I have to have first aid responders? Can I call 911? That can be found on this web page here. Let's go to the next one. Personal protective equipment, again, has a specific page on the OSHA website. A lot of the stuff that we talked about, the hazard assessment, there are examples. I believe I included that with what would be the handouts for this presentation. Go to the next one. The booklets, publications that we have, and again, the one on the left is going to be for first aid. Is a nice booklet that's probably 30 pages. The one on the right here is the personal protective equipment publication, and if you look at the date on that, they actually just updated that this year. So again, very useful, very handy. Again, it's going to be a magazine, like 40-50 pages, but again, it's going to be specific to personal protective equipment. Very good publication, can be downloaded from the OSHA website. Let's go to the next one. The quick takes, this is the electronic newsletter. I try to pitch this every time I have the opportunity to talk to the SBDC audience. Again, very useful. If you're not signed up for this, I encourage you to. It comes out twice a month, and it's just an OSHA electronic newsletter called Quick Takes. So again, very helpful. Keep you in the loop of things that are happening in OSHA. Go to the next one. And that's my contact information. And again, I guess the last part of our presentation today is going to be Dave Yanoschick, who will now talk to you about the OSHA consultation service.
Dave, do you want to put it into presentation mode? You have it in slide mode. There you go. Perfect. Thanks.
Good. Okay. Hey, thanks a lot. Appreciate being invited on today. What I would like to discuss is the Pennsylvania OSHA consultation program. So Pennsylvania OSHA consultation, it's a free service for small businesses to in Pennsylvania to assist them with their OSHA compliance needs. So if you're like me, anytime I hear something's free, my initial thought is, yeah, right, nothing's free, somebody's paying for it. And the answer is we actually get funded from Federal OSHA and the Pennsylvania Department of Labor, Bureau's Workers' Compensation Division kicks in a percentage of our funds. So what we're designed to do, it's provide free safety and health services to small and medium-sized businesses. And everybody kind of has a little bit different definition of what a small business is. For our program, a small business is a business that has less than 250 employees at the site, less than 500 corporate-wide. So that's kind of who we're geared to help. If a business submits a request for services, we give priority to businesses in high hazard industries and businesses that are involved in particularly hazardous operations. However, we'll honor requests from any small businesses that are coming in, regardless of the level of hazard that business may face. The only difference is we'd obviously give those businesses that are a little more hazardous a higher priority for an on-site visit. We'll also honor requests from larger businesses. So let's say a business puts a request in and say, hey, we would like to utilize your free service. We have less than 250 at our site, but our corporation has 600 employees. Well, we'll still come out and service you. Once again, we just give priority to the particularly smaller businesses, but we'll definitely attempt to fit those needs. Typically, what we'll do is, though, we tend not to do full scope visits. So we may not look at all your compliance needs, but we may limit it from a standpoint of, hey, maybe it's we could do some air monitoring for you, noise dosimetries, maybe look at some particular programs, review the machine guarding for a specific piece of equipment and so forth. So we may not have the time to look at everything that you guys do from an OSHA compliance standpoint. We may have to limit that scope a little bit, but we'll still service those businesses. Here are some typical services that we do provide. Once again, everything we do for you is free. Physical hazard evaluations, either full or limited, that would be at your site. Industrial hygiene exposure monitoring. So that could be air sampling, that could be noise dosimetries, sound level surveys, and those types of things. We can evaluate your written OSHA programs and development assistance from a standpoint that we have a lot of templates for those things. So if you're maybe deficient where you don't have a particular program that you're required to have, we have templates that we can provide you with that would just make that process developing that program a little easier. We can also assess your OSHA training. So take a look at what you're doing from an OSHA training compliance standpoint, and then if there are any things we could do to help you enhance that, we have a lot of resources that we could give you to hopefully bring that training up to compliance. Oftentimes we'll get requests from businesses after they've had a compliance inspection. This would be from OSHA enforcement. They've come to terms with that inspection, meaning everybody's on the same page. Hey, they're going to be cited. Here's what the citation is. Here's the monetary assessment. Here's the due date to comply. They may call us and say, hey, we've got cited by OSHA. We have to comply with this. For example, this machine guarding initiative. We don't know what to do. Can you come out and help us? And we'll obviously provide assistance in those circumstances as well. Also, what we'll do is we could do a more global assessment of the safety and health management system of an organization. So we kind of have an assessment process that we go through where we are reviewing the system through a multiple point checklist. And then if there are deficiencies in the safety and health management system, we can offer recommendations to bring those up to par as well. In addition to all that, we also do free from an offsite standpoint, daily telephones or emails availability. So you could always email our program. You can always call our program and just general compliance assistance questions. So we have safety and health compliance folks on staff every day just to answer those phone calls. We also do presentations and webinars, once again, based off of our product and services, based off of particular topics like Mark did today. And then additionally, which kind of came about all in the, when COVID kind of kicked off, we can also do a lot of services virtually. So for example, if you want us to review some safety and health programs, a lot of that stuff we could do without even coming out to your facility. So we do have some capabilities there as well. All of the consultants in our program that you would work with if you put a request in, we're all faculty in the safety science department at IUP. So although we do cover the whole state, we have faculty in the safety science department that are based out of Wilkes-Barre, Philadelphia, Harrisburg area, Erie area. So we're all faculty in the safety science department at IUP. It's just our mission is to provide these free services to these small businesses in Pennsylvania. As part of being the faculty, we're all we're all board certified, either certified safety professionals or certified industrial hygienists. Some folks are both. From an experience standpoint, we all average over 20 years experience in the private sector, managing safety and health, working for insurance companies and so forth. So if you do put a request in for service, just rest assured you're getting a trained, competent, experienced professional. And like I mentioned earlier, we're strategically located throughout PA, and that just kind of helps us service the clients a little quicker. If a business puts a request in for OSHA consultation services, anything we do for you is 100% confidential. So we don't provide any report we would do, any sampling data, anything to attorneys, to outside personnel requesting data, to OSHA enforcement. So anything we do for you, that's your information. You do with it what you want. We are, and per the regulations, we're prohibited from providing that information to anybody. OSHA consultation is separate from enforcement. So you have OSHA enforcement in Pennsylvania, those are federal employees. So Mark up in the Erie office, even though he's compliance assistance, he's still a federal employee. In Pennsylvania, every one of our consultants that do work through the PA OSHA consultation program, we're all state employees. So we don't issue citations, fines, penalties, anything like that you would receive potentially from an OSHA enforcement inspection. In addition, if you put a request in for services, let's say we come out to your facility, we identify a serious hazard, and we say, hey, look, here's what you need to do to correct that hazard. We come up with a due date for you to correct it. While you're working on correcting those hazards, you're exempt from programmed OSHA inspections. And program meaning it's like a random inspection. So your name popped up on the list today, maybe because your business is part of an emphasis program for heat, or a part of an emphasis program for amputations, or whatever it may be. So OSHA shows up and they say, hey, we're here to inspect your facility today because your business is part of this emphasis program. If you're actively working with us at that time, you could say, oh, hold on, we're actually open with OSHA consultation right now, meaning we have a visit in progress. And at that time, enforcement would leave. In addition, if you put a request in for services from us, you as the employer requesting the service, you're always in control of the scope. So we would never come in and say, hey, we need to look at XYZ. We ask you, what do you want us to look at? Do you want to keep it full scope, meaning we're looking at everything? Do you want to limit it to PPE, for example, that Mark was talking about today, or machine guarding, or noise? You're always in control of the scope of the visit as the employer, being that you invited us in. The catch is, anything we determine that you want in scope for your visit, if it's identified as a serious hazard or imminent danger hazard, you have to agree to correct that. And what we do is we come up with a mutually agreed upon due date. And then by that due date, you just send us confirmation back, written confirmation that you corrected the hazard. And we provide you with all the necessary documentation to do that during the visit. Because we'll have you correct that serious or imminent danger hazard, is the reason why OSHA will defer you from programmed inspections while you're working with us, because they know if we come across a serious hazard, we're going to have you correct that. So that's kind of how that process works. In addition, another program that we manage through the PA OSHA Consultation Program is the SHARP program. Some of you may have heard of VPP or OSHA VPP, which is the Voluntary Protection Program, which is a cooperative program that recognizes businesses that have exemplary safety and health management systems in larger corporations. Well, there's a similar program for smaller businesses called SHARP, the Safety and Health Achievement Recognition Program. So if we come out, some businesses request us to come out and assess them for SHARP. Some businesses, we recommend that they apply to SHARP just because we've been working with them for years, and over time they develop a pretty good safety and health management system. So businesses, to qualify for SHARP, you have to have an exceptional safety and health management system, which we evaluate and score, and then have OSHA total recordable case rate and DART, days away restricted and time case rates, below the industry average for your business code. And then what happens is, once we evaluate the business, determine how you score, look at your OSHA injury and illness rates. If they're good, you score high enough, we can then apply to enroll you into this program, where, once again, it's a recognition program that some businesses like from a marketing standpoint, just from an employee recognition standpoint. Additionally, businesses that are enrolled in this program are exempt from programmed OSHA inspections. So what happens is we apply to the OSHA regional office to admit a business. Once they're accepted and approved to be in the program, essentially the OSHA regional office notifies the local area office from OSHA that, hey, this business is in the SHARP program, and now put them on the exempt list from programmed OSHA inspections, essentially. So that's just kind of another side benefit as well. Kind of a new program we just got approval for last year was we received permission to grant SHARP designation to construction projects. And so that's something that's kind of new. If you are in the construction industry and that's a program you have questions about, you'll see my contact information at the end of the presentation here. I work specifically with that program, so feel free to send me an email, give me a call, and we can discuss those specifics with you. So now, let's say you want to request assistance. There's our phone number. You can see the link to our website there. If you go to our website, it's basically going to look like what you see on the screen there. You could scroll down a little bit. You see a link there for request a free OSHA consultation. What'll happen is if you do that, a form is going to fill up or pop up here. You just fill the form out, hit submit. Based off of what your request is, one of our admins will assign that visit to a consultant located in your geographic area. And then once again, kind of geared towards, are you looking for something more safety related, something more health related, or both? Essentially, you'll get an email back that your request has been assigned. Here's the consultants that have been assigned to you. Then after that, you just schedule your visit with those folks. Additionally, on that page, you can see some testimonials from clients that have used us in the past, basically just talking about their experience with the program. So, you know, a few different videos there. You may recognize some of these businesses for being in your geographic areas. Additionally, always like to promote the Pennsylvania Bureau of Workers' Compensation has a program that's called PATHS. That's an acronym, PATHS. They provide free safety and health training services. And they do most businesses, specifically small businesses. So if you go on their website, you can pull up their calendar of trainings they provide and just sign up for a training. You can request training. A lot of it they do virtually. They even do some of it on site. And kind of as it ties into Mark's presentation with first aid CPR AED, they also do free first aid CPR AED training for employers. And I say free, I think the only thing they do charge for is the book. So the training materials, which may be, you know, $30, $40, depending on what that is, but the actual training execution is free. So you could go get online to the PASS program and look for that if that's something you're specifically interested in, being that you participated in Mark's training today on that topic. But there's just a ton of training resources out there. Once again, all of that's free. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask those now. If not, you see my email there, my phone number. Feel to give me a call, send me an email with a question, be it compliance related or about the services of the program. All right, Cindy, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, awesome. Well, first of all, I'd just like to say thank you to David and to Mark. The Small Business Development Center has created an alliance with OSHA so that we can regularly give training like this to all of our small businesses in our across the Commonwealth. And so again, if you're looking for a specific topic, we are always looking for your feedback. But we do want to thank Mark and David for the partnership that you have with the Pennsylvania Small Business Development Center. I also like to just finish up today. I mean, if someone has a question, they'd like to be unmuted, then we can certainly do that. And Mark, you have a question.
I was just going to say, I answered two of the questions that were in the chat. I think Dave did one, and yeah, but if there's any more, yeah, by all means, you know.
Right. Yeah. And I'd just like to just say thank you to my colleague, Sandra Wheeler from the Gannon Small Business Development Center. Sandra, thanks for joining us. We will be sending out an evaluation form after today's webinar. So you could please take a few minutes to fill that out. And then Sandy, help me out here, maybe if you can, when our next OSHA training is scheduled, because I'll send that with the follow-up information today. So you'll get the PowerPoint presentation, you'll get the recording for today, and then you'll also get information about our upcoming webinar series. Thank you. This is awesome.
So I did put it in the chat, and it is online, but a lot of good conversations coming up. Please, log in, whether it's at PennWest or with Gannon and Mark, are we doing virtual again? Coming up, right? Yes, in July.
Yeah, July says virtual. Yes,
Awesome.
but
So that
we're more than happy to do it in person if we could. Dave, do you concur with that?
Yeah, whatever you guys need. No problem.
Well, that's one of the questions. So when
Oh,
we send out
oh,
the
it is?
evaluation form, we do ask their preferred method of training. So if they
Uh-huh.
like the recorded, or if they like the live webinar, if they like the in-person. So we'll be able to get some feedback there.
Okay.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to finish up for today and say thank you. We're finishing right on time. We appreciate you all being with us, and we look forward to having you join us in July. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mark,
Thank you.
David.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sandra. Have a great day.
You too.